the same sort of data I was showing you before. So this is the same. No, I'm sorry. This is 3 different kinds of equality. We have a whole bunch of different items we test out, and here are 3 of the items. So one item was a fair society would be one in which everyone's needs were met to the same degree. Would that be a fair society? And liberals say yes. Conservatives are right at the midline. They're not sure. And if we were to go to extreme conservatives, they're slightly negative. But the point is, this idea of meeting everyone's needs equally is a liberal idea of what a fair society is. But employees who work the hardest should be paid the most. Do you agree with that? A little bit? A lot? Well, everybody agrees with, on average, all across the spectrum, people agree with it. But note that liberals agree with it pretty, moderately strongly, but it gets stronger for conservatives. So conservatives strongly agree with that item. But now you've got a conflict. What if you believe both? Well, okay, so what do we do when some people work harder than others and they get paid the most? And then their needs get met the most. And there's some who aren't working very hard and their needs aren't. Well, what do? We've got a conflict if you're a liberal. If you're conservative, there's no conflict. Here's another item. A criminal should be made to suffer in the same way that his victim suffered. That sounds rather harsh, and liberals give it a very, very low. They substantially disagree with it, just disagree with it, and conservatives actually slightly agree with it, or right just above the midpoint. So my point is, overall, liberals value equality, but all other kinds of fairness, those related to proportionality, are valued more by conservatives. Okay, so with that as the background, now you can see how it is that the right, especially, for example, the Tea Party right, is furious at liberals, how liberalism became a dirty word in the 1980s all the way up to the present time in this way. If you sacralize victim groups, you say we must protect certain groups that have been historically victimized or are currently being victimized, and if that's your top priority, then you're going to define fairness as the pursuit of group-based equality or social justice. And then you're going to pursue policies like race-based affirmative action, which is a wildly unpopular policy in this country. I was on a conference call with some liberal pollsters around the time of the Michigan Supreme Court decision, and they were all trying to figure out, nobody's found it. Why can't we find the wording? What's the messaging? How can we get Americans to vote in all these state referenda that we're going to do away with race-based affirmative action? And I had to say, well, you can't find one because it's not there. There is no way to argue that race-based affirmative action is fair. Now, class-based, that's wildly, everybody sees that. But what you hear on conservative talk radio a lot is they quote Martin Luther King. They're always quoting him. I have a dream that someday, my children will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skins. So liberals end up pursuing policies that end up very strongly violating basic notions of proportionality. Liberal social policies ignore the Protestant work ethic. They channel benefits to the poor unconditionally. In fact, you could describe many liberal social programs, especially those from the 60s, they got refined a bit, as basically, let's tax the ants to bail out the grasshoppers, for those of you who know the ant and the Aesop's fables. And on crime and punishment, liberals tend to side with the accused because the accused are often thought to be members of victimized groups, and so if you habitually favor the accused and think that the police are lying and the DA is lying and the laws are racist or prejudicial, so on conservative talk radio, they're always talking about how liberal judges want to release all the child rapists to come to your neighborhood. So anyway, you can see how the pursuit of liberal values gives conservatives quite a lot of fodder to raise moral outrage against liberals. I wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal titled What the Tea Partiers Really Want, and I summarized it by the basic idea that what they want is to maintain the law of karma. Not in all its respects, but the basic idea is in the law of karma is like the law of gravity. If you do something, it will come back and affect you. If you do good, something good will happen to you. And so the liberal perspective is to say, look, he's about to be hit by this domino. Somebody save him. And the conservative answer is, don't you dare. Don't you dare interfere with the law of karma. Now, obviously, the law of karma was actually created to explain why it is that terrible things happen to obviously innocent people. So I'm not saying that the Tea Partiers are right to say we've got to never bail people out. Obviously, bad things happen. People get diseases. People get cancer. It has nothing to do with anything they did. So I'm not saying it's right overall, but I think there is an element of truth here that in protecting people, you often end up degrading the system to encourage more bad behavior. I think that is pretty straightforward, and anybody who's had a child has probably noticed that many times. So what the Tea Partiers really want, what the Tea Party is really about, it's not really fundamentally about liberty. That's some of the original leadership of it. But what really, the main issue that they're about is karma. So here's the rant that launched the Tea Party, Rick Santelli, about the Bush and then Obama bailouts. The government's promoting bad behavior. How many of you people want to pay for your neighbor's mortgage that has an extra bathroom and can't pay their bills? How many of you ants want to bail out the grasshoppers? Raise your hand. And that is the line that launched the Tea Party. So that's the second foundation. It's the same sort of story. I can do it much more briefly because they're simpler for the other foundations. So the third foundation of morality, remember we had care was the first, proportionality is the second. Now we're on loyalty and betrayal. So again, many animals are social, but only when you get groups that can organize in this way, organized by norms, rules, punishments, shared intentions, shared goals, then you can get not just war and the military, but you get sports, which is, I think, sports is to war what pornography is to sex. We like this stuff. We like this groupish tribal stuff so much that we spend massive amounts of time just watching men form artificial tribes and then rooting for them. And I never really understood that myself, but I'm told that sports is immensely enjoyable. As once again, there you go. Again, if you have a one foundation morality versus if you have this loyalty foundation, you're going to have very different ideas about what it means to support our troops. And for anybody who understands the loyalty foundation, it means you give them everything you can so that they win. That's what it means to support them. But if you don't get that, if you don't think about loyal groups, if you think about individuals that might suffer, you think, support our troops, bring them home alive. I support them, I want them to survive. And for most of the country who cares about loyalty and national patriotism issues, that is, at very worst, at very best, a sort of a tin ear, you miss it, you don't get what this is really about. Here's a little stronger example. 2 photographs I took near my house in Charlottesville. One person paid extra money to get a license plate that says Old Glory, and it says United We Stand, so they paid $30 extra a year to the Virginia Department of Transit to get the license celebrating the American flag. They have a Virginia Cavaliers sticker, which is our sports team, so they're tribal, groupish, sport, yay UVA, yay America. Conversely, here's a stop sign where someone says, stop Americanism. Now, it could, of course, be an Al-Qaeda operative in Charlottesville, Virginia, but my guess is it was a far-left, possibly anarchist youth spray painting vandalism about how much he hates America, and in terms of especially American foreign policy, which is oppressive. Here, this one really sort of hurts to even see, but now I'm not saying this is a common sentiment. I think it's a very rare sentiment, but this is at the extreme left, the anarchist fringe of the left, you get a hostility to anything related remotely to the military or authority. And it just makes it so easy. I mean, liberals are just, they hand ammunition to Ann Coulter by the shovelful for her to write books like Treason, Liberal Treachery from the Cold War to the War on Terrorism. So I'll show you just the data here for the next 3 foundations. It's all the same story. Here is the exact same blue line I showed you before about care. Remember, liberals value it most. Everybody values it, but liberals value it most. Now, these are the lines for the foundation scores, not individual items. This is the average of all the items on that foundation. So liberals value care more. Oh, no, I'm sorry. These are individual items. All right, so that's the line I showed you before. The green line here is it is more important to be a team player than to express oneself. Totally non-political question. We try to not ask, like, what do you think about gun control or abortion? We don't ask that. It is more important to be a team player than to express oneself. Liberals disagree. Conservatives agree. That's an example of the loyalty foundation. You value groups as things that command you to submit your individuality and your goals to the group, to what the group is trying to achieve. Respect for authority is something all children need to learn. Liberals disagree, conservatives agree. That's the authority foundation. And people should not do things that are disgusting, even if no one is harmed. Liberals strongly disagree, and conservatives agree. So these are the next three foundations I'm talking about, the loyalty, authority, and sanctity foundations. Bottom line, liberals value care, but not loyalty, authority, and sacredness. Or sanctity. Sanctity. Conservatives value them equally. Now, I'm not saying that liberals don't ever value it. Liberals can do teams. They can do team sports. And, of course, they can be a team to fight the conservative team. It's not that they don't have it. I'm just saying, relatively speaking, Conservative moral matrices are built on all of the foundations, and liberals are focused on care and harm. That's our finding. And so, if you don't value the loyalty foundation, if you sacralize victim groups, then you're going to blame America for harming victims. And you see this on the far left, the constant, of course they hated George Bush, but they even hate Obama because he didn't stop the wars. America's still killing people. Therefore, America is bad. Also the founding fathers are bad because they had slaves. They were all sorts. So America is bad. The founding fathers are bad. American history is bad. I believe that liberals basically, the most serious error that liberals have made, which has made it so hard for them to win presidential elections, is that they don't really get the national motto, which is E pluribus unum. Liberals since the 60s have especially basically celebrated pluribus and not really been concerned about unum at all. So diversity and multiculturalism, let's, pluribus, 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 no unum. And those things have actually been shown to decrease trust, decrease social capital. They backfire, actually. Liberals often block efforts to increase unum. So English is the national language. This is a contentious issue because one of the few things uniting America is our language. Liberals often end up being unpatriotic universalists. The flag is not sacred, and they often call themselves citizens of the world, as Obama famously did in Berlin. Here's one of our survey items. I identify more closely with the people of the world at large than with people in my own country. Liberals agree, conservatives disagree. So that's the third foundation. The fourth foundation is authority. Here are signs of respect and deference in two very closely related species. Not that it feels the same, but the ethology, the bodily displays of submissiveness are the same, or similar. We expect shows of respect for our leaders. Conservatives seem to care a lot more about this, but liberals basically can certainly understand it, that respect should be shown. And the Joe Wilson moment when Joe Wilson said, "You lie," very disrespectful. Liberals can get that, especially if it's their guy being disrespected, although when it was Bush in the office, presumably many would have thought it was quite appropriate to disrespect the president. In general, if you look at, if you see images such as this, this one down here says, "God's in charge, so shut up." What do you think? Unitarian or Baptist? Whereas if you see signs like this was I used to subscribe to The Nation, you can buy a coffee cup that says insubordination. Celebrate insubordination. That's good. Authorities are bad, so insubordination is good. Annoy a Republican, question authority, because they're just authoritarian ignoramuses. So we liberals, we think for ourselves, but they don't. And once again, here I'd like to concentrate on the top one, the no gods, no country, no masters. There's a very strong anti-authoritarian streak in most liberal morality. So here's the kind of sacrilege that you'll commit based on this foundation. Once again, if you start by sacralizing victim groups, then you will demonize powerful groups. Capitalists, I don't think it's so much sacrilege when the left opposes capitalists. But police, teachers, signs of authority, symbols of authority, conservatives get very upset at the liberal efforts to subvert their authority. You'll side with the underdogs to weaken the powerful. You'll do things like pushing strongly for laws that allow teenage girls to get abortions without telling their parents. I forget where I heard some woman say this. She said, "I would never let my 13-year-old daughter pick her own dentist. But I'm supposed to let her pick her own abortionist?" I mean, that's pretty outrageous. And if you felt that there was a political party pushing to let your daughter get an abortion without your knowledge, how would you feel about that? Liberals then tend to heap contempt on traditions and bourgeois virtues. Hollywood almost never celebrates any sort of authority or tradition. It's usually shown as just racist, corrupt, suburban idiocy. And the net effect is that liberals are seen as subverting order and promoting chaos. I think this is why the Obama, when it was modified to look like Heath Ledger as the Joker in Batman, who's the representative of chaos, I think it works for a lot of conservatives. They see liberals as the force of chaos. They see them basically as Satan. The fifth foundation, there's one more to go. I'll do this quickly. Issues of sanctity and degradation. Purity, what does that mean? Sexual purity. Well, this is a painting called The Allegory of Chastity. So, all right, purity is about guarding women's sexuality and patriarchal oppression to keep it for the man, right? Well, liberals are certainly opposed to that view of sexuality. They celebrate sexuality, deviant sexuality, unusual sexuality. This is from Madonna's album Sex, I think it was called. or a book called Sex. Drug use, basically there are two ideas out there. One is that the body is a temple. The other is that the body is a playground. There's a bumper sticker I saw in Charlottesville. Your body may be a temple.